Hello everyone. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Josh Roberts, and about a few weeks ago now, the lovely people at NABS asked me to give a short talk about my experiences of anxiety and mental health. Thank you to everyone who has watched the video, shared it with colleagues, and sent feedback and comments. It's really encouraging to see the level of engagement that we have done. We had a bunch of questions come out of my talk, and just wanted to take 15 minutes today to try to answer some of those questions. Apologies for the phone, it's a bit naff, but it's the only way I could think of to do it. So let's jump right in with the first question. I was wondering what other practical takeaways you still use from your CBT other than questioning and challenging your thoughts. I did CBT last year for my anxiety and found it a little overwhelming and difficult to practically implement a lot of the techniques, especially whilst being busy and working full time. So basically, a question from someone who found CBT helpful, but maybe struggled to fit it in and around their kind of busy working life. This is something I hear a lot. It's extremely common. And I guess entirely understandable, particularly in the current environment. There's so many draws on people's time that actually finding the time to sit down or finding the time in between moments to arrest your thoughts and to start challenging them with logic and evidence, asking questions like, what's the real likelihood of this worry or anxiety coming true? And what's the real severity, even if it did come true? It's difficult to do that and fit that in around our working lives. The problem is that for CBT to really work, for you to really enjoy the benefits of challenging your thoughts, you do need to prioritise it. There's no simple way around it. You need to find time in the day. As I said, it can be little moments kind of off the hoof, on the hoof, off the hoof, something to do with hooves. In the loo at work, or in a meeting room, or in the stairwell, or whatever it is, to arrest the thoughts in your head. Things like, I'm never going to sleep again, I'm useless at my job, I don't love my partner enough, all those sort of classic anxious thoughts, to arrest them and start challenging them with those questions. The key thing to remember is it starts off being quite a manual process. Cognitive behavioural therapy. It's something that you really do have to dedicate time and effort to. But over time, it becomes very much more automatic. And pretty soon, the stage that I'm at now is that I can be arresting and challenging thoughts whilst at the very same time having a conversation with someone, or watching a movie, or playing in a five-a-side football match. The only other thing, actually, that I would mention on CBT, which is something that I didn't really touch on in the talk, in order to really get the most out of it, not only do you need to prioritise it, but you can also really feel very comfortable shopping around when it comes to resources. What do I mean by that? Well, my own experience of cognitive behavioural therapy has been therapist-led. So I've sat down, I've gone to a room, sat down with someone who's trained and knows what they're doing, and they've asked me a bunch of questions, and we've run through all sorts of exercises and thought experiments and things like that. There is an alternative to that, which is to learn the techniques yourself from videos, from reading books and attending workshops or seminars, those sorts of things. CBT is a bit like learning to drive. You can spend loads of money going to see really expensive driving instructors, or you can find someone local who happens to work for you, or at least when it comes to the theory test, you can kind of learn it from a book or learn it from videos. But the problem with that is that what's particularly us Brits, I would say, is we tend to settle for the first book or the first therapist or the first video we watch and think that that's the only thing that we can use. And in reality, it's absolutely totally fine to shop around and to find either a therapist or a sort of set of resources that work for you. Once you've done that, like I say, there's no way around this, unfortunately, but you do just have to prioritise it. And why wouldn't you? Your mental health is the single most important thing, maybe alongside your physical health. Your health is the single most important thing in your life. So it's definitely worth prioritising if you can. All right, let's go. So question number 2. How can I spot the signs of anxiety in a colleague, friend or family member, and what can I do to support them? Okay, so how can I spot the signs of anxiety in a friend or colleague, family member, whatever it is? I would say it is difficult, because the danger or the challenge that we face with mental health problems is that so much of it exists beneath the surface. And certainly, if you were to ask my friends or a lot of my colleagues whether or not they knew the extent to which I was struggling, I think most of them would probably say that they didn't, because I was able to somehow kind of function outwardly whilst kind of inwardly disintegrating. So it is a problem. There are things to look out for. Of course, it's the sort of fairly standard stuff when it comes to identifying mental health problems with our friends and whatnot. If you notice that someone has become much more sort of reclusive or change in their personality, if you've noticed that they're sleeping a lot more or sleeping a lot less, if you've noticed rapid weight gain or rapid weight loss, those kinds of things would indicate that something is going wrong. The good news is that all you have to do is ask. Very often, the question of how are you, or are you okay at the moment, or you seem a little different to normal. Very often that question will be met, by someone sort of shutting down the conversation. But that's fine. That's completely fine, because having asked the question, the person who's suffering or not suffering, I should say, knows that you are an ally. You are someone that they can come to and talk to if they do want to talk about it. So it's those kind of classic things, like I mentioned, change in personality, those kind of things. The other thing I would just mention in answering this question is, particularly see this with maybe slightly older folks, is identifying or a failure to identify mental health problems because they've existed for a long period of time. So very often what we do is we, as a society, is we mistake eccentricity or personality quirks for what in reality is a diagnosable, treatable mental health problem. So, I see this a little bit in my own family actually, where people will say, "Oh, she's a worrier," or "Oh, well, he always, he always gets down in the dumps in January," or "I've never been able to sleep." Those kinds of phrases would actually, if I was having that conversation to someone, now I've experienced what I've experienced, I might be tempted to say to them, well, actually, what you have doesn't sound like a, personality quirk or an eccentricity. It sounds like something that actually you could get help for. So keep your sort of radar scanning for those kind of people, those folks who need our help, as well as the people who, maybe you notice a specific change in their personality. The second part of the question was, well, what do you do next? And I think the first thing, as I mentioned before, is ask the question. It doesn't matter if you get shut down or ignored. In asking the question, you've kind of proved that you're an ally. And the second thing, the most important thing, I think, is to help people get help. So we worry a lot, and it's understandable that when a friend or a colleague comes to us with a mental health problem, we worry that we have to be the ones to solve it. And you sort of launch into your spiel about how you get nervous a bit, or how you struggle to sleep if you've been on a night out, or those kinds of things, which, far from making the person's problem better, can actually end up making it worse. So all I would recommend there is to help people find help. NABS obviously is an incredible resource, and I'm not just saying that because we're working together. I say it because I've used the resources myself. Direct people towards that, or direct people towards videos, books, therapists that you think could be valuable for them, and sort of accept the limitations of your own advice. Understand that you're not a qualified mental health therapist or nurse, so it's unlikely that you'll be able to fix that problem, but you will listen, and then you will help them to find help. I think the most important thing, though, I really do think this, that the most important thing when it comes to helping our colleagues and friends with mental health problems is to do the basics of friendship really, really well. So text them, call them, invite them to things, take them to the cinema, buy them, a cupcake on a Friday, or whatever it might be. Just do the basics of friendship really, really well, and do that persistently. People with mental health problems, and I say this because I am one, and also because I've spent lots of time hanging around with other people who have them. We can be nightmares. Okay, we can be very changeable. 1 minute we want to go out, the next minute we want to stay in. We can be laughing at a party and then, crying in the cab on the way home. Today I want to talk about my problem, tomorrow I don't, etc., etc. And in the face of that, what lots of people do is just go, this sounds like hard work, I'm just going to, go and do something else. And I would really just urge you not to do that, to stick around, to be persistent, to keep asking the question, to keep helping people find help, because eventually, that person will get better, because it always gets better. Eventually they'll get better, and sticking around for that moment, I promise, is always worth it. Yes, so question 3, how can men help other anxious men seek help? So it's a really good question, a personal passion project of mine. The relationship between gender, sex, whatever, and mental health is really quite peculiar. So we have a very odd scenario where women are much, much more likely to have a mental health problem, but men are much, much more likely to end up killing themselves when they do. So there's this kind of very odd dichotomy going on. On the one hand, women seem to suffer from their problems, but on the other hand, the sort of symptoms of the problem seem to be most acute for men. Why is that the case? Well, I think a lot of it is to do with history and sort of societal expectations. Really until the 19th century, in the medical sort of definition of mental health, it wasn't possible. It wasn't physically possible for men to have mental health problems. The sort of scientific consensus at the time was that conditions like melancholia, depression, hysteria, modern day anxiety, the theory was that these were linked to movements of the uterus, and because blokes don't have uteruses or uteri, it wasn't possible for us to have mental health problems at all. And I think that kind of legacy probably still exists slightly today, or at least women have had, a good 500-year, 1,000-year head start when it comes to acknowledging these problems, talking about them, and getting help for them. So the first thing to say is I don't think it's men's fault that we have the kind of peculiar problem that we have. How can we go about fixing it? Well, the great thing, the only real benefit of mental health problems versus physical health problems is that often just talking about the problem, just sharing experiences, can be enough to sort of start people on the road to recovery. It's often, the case that you need more than that. You need, like we're talking about therapy, or you need to make lifestyle changes, or even a sort of pharmaceutical intervention. But for almost everyone I've spoken to, sharing their story, speaking openly about their problems, has been the first and most kind of impactful step in getting better. So we need to encourage men to talk about their problems, and to acknowledge, to educate that those problems are problems that can be fixed. Okay, maybe not fixed. That implies, I think, too much finality, but that these problems can become manageable to the point where they no longer impact your life. I'm not quite there yet myself. Still got a few different things I'm sort of working on. But I do see now a time when, although I will have probably anxious flare-ups throughout the rest of my life, I do see a time I'm capable of imagining a situation where the anxiety is so low level and so managed that it doesn't really impact my life. It becomes like, I don't know, mild hay fever, or the occasional flare-up of eczema or something like that. So we need to encourage men to talk about their problems, and we need to educate them to make sure that if they do have a problem, they know that they can ask for help. And we need to do that for quite some time. One final thought on that, though, is we're never going to get there whilst we're still using this phrase "man up." I absolutely detest it as a sort of turn of phrase, so I would thoroughly encourage you to can that as well. Folks, thank you so much. I hope the answers to those questions have been helpful. If you have any other questions, do feel free to email me direct. My email is hello@joshroberts.co.uk. And of course, I couldn't speak to you today without finally plugging my book. So if you want to read more, you want to find out more about anxiety and how to manage it, do get hold of a copy of Anxious Man, Notes on a Life Lived Nervously. It's out now. Thanks so much.